If you are a Warriors fan, stop everything now and pay attention, because what happened in the last few hours directly affects the future of the team and explains why so much was going wrong. A lot of people were feeling that something didn't fit, that strange decisions were being made, that the atmosphere was no longer the same on the court. This feeling of frustration, of seeing wasted talent and unfulfilled promises, was not his paranoia. Today, finally, an unexpected move completely changes the scenario, points a new path, and could be exactly the turnaround that the Warriors needed. Stay with me until the end, because understanding this changes the way you will see this season from now on. Before following, subscribe to the channel and leave a like now, because this really helps this content reach more fans who are going through exactly the same frustration as you. Activate the bell so you don't miss any updates, because what's happening with Warriors changes quickly and every detail matters. And don't leave the video, because from now on I'm going to show you point by point why this play changes everything, what's behind it, and how it directly impacts the future of the team you follow every night. Stay with me. If you've been following the Golden State Warriors long enough, you know when something special is brewing. It's not just about isolated victories. It's not just about a positive sequence or an above-average game. It's that rare feeling that the team is breathing together again, that the pieces are finally falling into place, that there is purpose on the court, and that was exactly what was happening. The Warriors had been playing perhaps their best basketball of the season, winning most of their recent games, building confidence, regaining identity, making the fans believe again that it was still possible to dream big. That's why the impact of the news that suddenly emerged was so brutal. It wasn't just another common injury, it wasn't a temporary scare. It was one of those moments that silences an entire crowd. Jimmy Butler, at the height of an extremely solid period with the Warriors shirt, suffers a ruptured anterior cruciate ligament and is out for the season. When this information was confirmed, everything changed. The mood changed, the conversations changed, the plans changed. What seemed like a path of continuous growth became, from one second to the next, a huge question mark. Anyone who lived through the recent Warriors era knows how much this type of blow hurts. Memories come quickly. End of 2019, devastating injuries, seasons interrupted by bodies that simply couldn't handle the weight of the dream. And now, again, when the team finally showed clear signs of evolution, history seems to repeat itself. The frustration doesn't just come from the player's absence, but from the feeling of injustice. Jimmy had been delivering everything: intensity, leadership, offensive production, defensive commitment. He wasn't just a name on the court, he was an emotional pillar. The hardest thing to accept is the context. Warriors weren't dragging their feet, they weren't in crisis. Quite the opposite. The team was coming together with convincing victories, a flowing attack, a functioning defense, and secondary players growing. There was a clear feeling of now go. And then, in the midst of this positive moment, news emerges that forces the entire franchise to stop and rethink everything. Short-term, medium-term, long-term. Nothing is left untouched. This injury doesn't just affect rotation. It completely messes up the planning at a delicate moment in the calendar on the eve of the trade deadline. Decisions that were perhaps simple now become extremely complex. Is it worth being aggressive in the market? Does it make sense to sacrifice future assets? Is it better to preserve choices and young talents thinking about tomorrow? Or is there a moral obligation to try everything now while Steph Curry is still on the court at a high level? It is impossible to talk about this situation without touching on the age factor. Jimmy Butler is not a young man on the rise. He built a brilliant, respected career based on effort, competitiveness, and total dedication. But time does not negotiate with anyone. An injury of this type, at this stage of your career, raises inevitable doubts. Not about character, not about will, but about what the body can still sustain. This doesn't diminish who he is, but it makes the scenario more delicate. Before the injury, Jimmy was playing extremely efficient basketball. He scored regularly, distributed the game, defended at a high level, and perhaps most importantly, seemed happy. There was a lightness in his way of leading, something that was not seen in his last moments in other contexts. He brought competitive joy to the squad, and it showed on the court. Losing this isn't just losing numbers, it's losing an atmosphere. Given this scenario, the question arises almost automatically. What now? Where do the Warriors go? The answer is not simple, but it starts within the cast itself, because despite the blow, there are positive signs that cannot be ignored. Young players and supporting players were growing precisely during this positive sequence, and now, like it or not, the responsibility increases. Brandon Podziemski is a clear example of this. In the last few games, he has not just scored, but impacted the game in many ways, made the right decisions, showed confidence, competed defensively, led in small ways. This kind of growth is no coincidence. Opportunities arise in the most difficult times, and for some players, this can be the turning point in their career. The same goes for Moody Moses. When the ball drops, when confidence is high, he completely changes the spacing of the court. His latest performances show a player who is looser, more aggressive, more aware of his role. In a scenario without Jimmy, this type of production stops being a bonus and becomes a necessity. It's no longer, if it works, great, we need this. Buddy Hield also joins this conversation. A player who understands his role, who knows how to respond when required. His emotional reaction to Jimmy's injury showed how connected the cast is. In moments like this, group chemistry matters as much as talent. Teams that survive adversity often have this as their foundation. And there is also DeAnthony Melton, who had been extremely efficient, scoring well, defending, spacing the court. The Warriors had been breaking internal records for three-pointers, involving several different players. This doesn't happen by chance. It happens when there is ball movement, collective trust, and leadership. Now, the challenge is to maintain this without one of the opponent's main points of defensive attention. Of course, all of this happens under the shadow of Steph Curry. He is the axis of everything. When situations like this arise, the weight inevitably falls on him, not just for what he does on the court, but for what he represents. Steph has carried this team before, has already defied odds, has already written unlikely chapters, but the clock ticks. Every season matters. Every decision now has historical weight. That's why the discussion about Jonathan Kuminga gains so much strength in this context. For a long time, there was talk about lack of opportunities, inconsistent minutes, untapped potential. Now, the scenario changes completely. If there is ever a time to take on greater responsibilities, that time is now. Warriors need aggression, attacking the rim, constant pressure on the opponent's defense. Kuminga has tools for this. It remains to be seen whether it will have the space and confidence necessary to transform potential into real impact. This moment requires courage from the coaching staff. Insisting on conservatism may be safe, but it may not be enough. On the other hand, releasing young talent in high-pressure situations is a risk. But every great sports story involves risks. The season is not over. Despite the pessimistic discourse that dominates social networks, the reality is that the Warriors still have weapons, they still have talent, they still have one of the greatest players in history in their squad. The fan feels pain, feels frustration, feels anger. This is natural, but he also feels something deeper, attachment. Anyone who has followed this team for years knows that we have been in worse places. We have already been discredited. We already saw the end announced ahead of time. And yet, this group found ways to surprise. Jimmy Butler, even injured, represents this. The image of him smiling, even in the face of such a tough injury, says a lot. It's not denial of pain, it's resistance. It is the mentality of someone who understands that the game continues, even when everything seems to fall apart. This attitude is contagious. That spirit remains in the locker room. There is no guarantee that this season will have a happy ending. No one can promise titles, finals, or historic campaigns. But what can be said is that there is still a way. It is narrower, more difficult, more uncertain, but it exists. And as long as Steph Curry is on the court, as long as there are players willing to grow under pressure, as long as the franchise believes in itself, nothing can be ruled out. This is not about ignoring reality. It's about facing it head on. Accept the blow, adjust the route, and move on. Great teams are not defined just by the titles they win, but by the adversity they survive. And maybe, just maybe, this is another one of those stories that no one saw coming, but that in the end helps explain why Warriors can never be underestimated. The sky remains blue, even on cloudy days, and the season is still being written. And that is exactly why this moment cannot be treated as an end, but as a definitive test of identity. When everything is in your favor, winning is a consequence. When the situation falls apart, staying competitive becomes a choice. The Warriors are in front of one of those chapters that separate ordinary teams from franchises that build legacy. Every decision from here on out weighs. Every game counts. Every possession carries meaning. There is no more room for autopilot. Now it's character, reading, courage, and response on the court. If you want to understand how this story will really unfold, if you want to follow every behind the scenes, every possible movement, every adjustment that could change the course of the season, don't stop here. In the pinned comment, I left the Golden State Warriors News Today playlist, where I update everything in real time, with in-depth and noise-free analysis. Get in there now, follow the next chapters, and stay until the end of this journey, because what comes next could be one of the most unexpected narratives of this era of Warriors.